Especially welcome our guests, who we are very thankful for them to have accepted this invitation to come to talk about neuroethics, and it's really a great opportunity for us. And I won't present, while I present them, but you won't see them, so maybe at the talk each person will be presented by the chairperson in charge of the talk. So before giving them the floor, I would like just to have a very brief introduction about what is neuroethics, because maybe some of you don't really know what this term covers. And so basically neuroethics is, wait, how it works. Yeah, neuroethics is part of the field of applied ethics, which itself is part with, along meta-ethics and normative ethics, to moral philosophy or ethics, which is a branch of philosophy. Okay? And applied ethics encompass all kind of ethics which are concerned with practical application, the moral aspects of different practical application of professional, like you have business ethics, and among those you have bioethics, general bioethics, and neuroethics. So basically the roots of neuroethics could be traced back to the middle of the last century, when the first doubts about the omnipotence and the benevolence of science arose. And the first sign of that maybe the book Brave New World of Aldous Huxley in the 30s, which depicted an authoritarian society which was held together using science, and in particular neuroscience as well. But the real shock came with the atomic bomb of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where basically it was the end of the age of the innocence of science, where scientific, and especially physicists, because they were concerned at the first place at that time, questioned the role of science in the society and the ethical and moral values of science. And this questioning then spread to other sciences as well, and biology is also. And the first evidence of that was the conference of the Aix-Marseille conference in '75, which was called together by Paul Berg and Sidney Brenner because they were concerned about the application of a new science that they were creating at the time, which was molecular biology. And basically they were concerned about the possibility of having very pathogenic bacteria, artificial bacteria that would be spread uncontrollably. So this conference was called together and provided the guidelines, the Aix-Marseille guidelines that we use still today for in our laboratories. And the concern for neuroscience came a little bit later in the 90s, basically late 90s. And it's linked to the explosion of cognitive neurosciences and also neuropharmacology and brain-computer interfaces. And the specialty of the need to have a special neuroethics beside general bioethics was because neuroscience touches upon the brain, which is something special for us. I mean, the seat of our individuality, or mind, if it exists, and whatever. So it raises ethical questions which are very special and that are not the same as that of general bioethics. And moreover, the application of neuroscience goes beyond the medical field. I mean, it pervades all society. I mean, you will have example where it's really something that touches upon a lot of aspects of society, so the ethical questions are more profound and more wide than for bioethics. So there was a need to have something like neuroethics, and that culminated in in the foundation of the International Neuroethics Society exactly 10 years ago. It was in May 2006 in Aix-Marseille again. And today this field has grown. It has its own journals. It has departments, professors, meetings. So it's a real scientific field today. So what is neuroethics? Basically, I will use for this presentation the definition of Eden-Roskis and the presentation by Marta Farah to give you an overview. So neuroethics is basically can be divided. It's very schematic, okay, but still in a field that is called Ethics of Neuroscience and Neuroscience for Ethics. So Ethics of Neuroscience deals with all the ethical aspects or the practical application of neuroscientific results and the technologies that are used in neuroscience or that are coming from neuroscience. And among these, we have different things. The first is what is called enhancement, which means enhancing, augmenting the capabilities of humans, human brain, basically. And using different technologies, you have everything which relates to drugs, different drugs, and I mean, that's obviously can be a problem if you think of the problem we have with doping in sport. I mean, that's raise ethical question. Here, the ethical question are even more important, and that's a field that will be covered by Eric Racine in our first talk. Then we have enhancements which can be obtained by different devices, and here there is the brain stimulation, prosthesis, and also brain-computer interfaces. And although brain-computer interface at the beginning is basically for patients to recover lost functions, but it raises also ethical questions because it can be also used for enhancement. And that's especially true for transhumanism, which goes beyond enhancement in the sense that it doesn't want to augment existing capabilities, but it wants to add new capabilities to humans. New senses, immortality, and ultimately fusing brain and artificial intelligence and obtaining a new species, something that would be not human anymore. So that's something that obviously raises huge ethical questions. Unfortunately, it's not something that we talk about today because it's just we couldn't fit everything in one day, so we had to make some choices. So that's for another occasion, maybe. So beyond enhancement, we have everything which relates to imaging. It's basically with a functional MRI, which has many uses. It has also some commercial uses which are of very dubious value, like light detection and neuromarketing. But we have also more serious uses, I would say, which is the use of imaging to assess the brain consciousness states of patients, and that's something that Athena Demersi will talk about. I'm sorry, there is Jens Clausen, which will be our second speaker. We talk about the use of basically brain-computer interfaces. So here we have our third speaker, who is Athena, who will talk about mostly the evaluation of the brain states. And the third chapter of ethics is the social uses of neuroscience and neuroscience technologies. And here the first thing is law and justice and the use of neurotechnology in justice. And that raises, again, very wide ethical concern about responsibility. What is responsibility? Is the argument that it's not my fault, it's my brain that did it, something that is a valid argument. We have also the possibility of predicting the so-called criminal personalities or even trying to cure them, which is something that is proposed by Adrian Raine. I mean, all these pose huge ethical questions, and that's something that we have in the afternoon by Jennifer Chandler presented. Now, all these, and the last thing, sorry, is the military application. We won't talk about that either, but basically the military application use the techniques that are used in enhancement. So the ethical questions which are raised here are more or less the same, so we won't have any talk about that today. So all these aspects are evaluated using principles that are derived basically from ethics, and very much based on the principles that were established by Beauchamp and Childress in the 70s that give the criteria to evaluate and judge the ethical aspects of a bioethical principle, because at the origin it was for bioethics in general, but they are used also for neuroethics. So there are four principles which are beneficence and non-maleficence, which covers notion of the risk and benefit, quality of life, alternatives, and so on. There is the principle of autonomy, which covers the freedom to choose to use given technology, or the freedom to refuse. So the negative freedom, what is called the negative freedom, is also the question of informed consent, the dependence, and so on. And then the fourth principle is that of justice, which is more the social aspect of the ethical aspects, which go about distributive justice, discriminations, and so on. So these are the principles which are used to evaluate the ethical, I don't say validity, but the ethical aspect of a given technology. Now, what I would like to say also is that the ethic of neuroscience is something which has a very large prospective aspect. I mean, many questions you will see deals with technologies that are not necessarily large, widespread yet, or they are sometimes in development, or sometimes in perspective. So it's a proactive thinking about preparing ourselves to technologies that are going to arrive. Now to come back, and so the last aspect is the neuroscience of ethics, which basically is concerned with the origin of ethics. The one hand, the neural mechanism of ethics, what happens in the brain when we have an ethical behavior, and the other part is the evolutionary origin of ethics, so how ethics came to exist in our species, where it comes from. And a related thing which is not part of neuroethics, but which is very closely related, is what is called philosophy of mind, which deals with the problem of mind and body, free will and responsibility. We talked about responsibility with law, so there is a clear relationship here. And this huge field will be covered by Bernard Bertschi at the end of the day. So that's about what I wanted to say about neuroethics. Before giving the floor to Eric, just for the organization, so the talk will be about 45 to 50 minutes long, and then we have a short, about 10-minute discussion. In case you couldn't ask your question within your 10 minutes, don't be disturbed. We have a general discussion at the end of the day, so you can come back to your question at that time. Okay, so thank you for your attention, and Rick and the chairperson for